and Marina, 3 out of 4 of the Earlywork team. And this is the introduction for Earlywork Academy. Super excited to have you here. As indicated by this slide, of course. Mandatory. Just give you a breakdown for tonight's session. And thank you all for joining as well at 7 p.m. I really appreciate it. For those who aren't as familiar with Earlywork, first off, we're just going to be giving just a quick rundown on like, wait, what the hell is Earlywork? Number 2, we're going to be doing a deep dive on the Academy in terms of what the program looks like, the curriculum, and the process with which we help you get a job through the Academy. And then finally, we'll cover kind of some application tips around both the written application and then the interviews as well with the admissions team for Earlywork. After that, we'll also have time for Q&A. So I believe there'll be a Slido hopping into the chat anytime now. Cool. Alrighty, so maybe quickly on Earlywork. So it's good to see some familiar faces in the Zoom, but also a fair few that I've never seen before, which is beautiful. So especially for you folks, really Earlywork is building the digital campus for tomorrow's tech talent. That's ultimately kind of the vision we're shooting for. We originally started out as a newsletter to help people, find tech job listings. That evolved into an online digital community, the Earlywork community, or Earlywork Village now. And from there, we've spent the past 2 years working with both students, recent graduates, and companies really to help great talent find amazing roles in the tech ecosystem. So kind of what that looks like today, kind of our 3 core pillars. Number 1 is kind of Earlywork content. So, we do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, now starting to get deeper on the TikToks as well, but really providing resources, I think, to try and democratize access to just high quality information about, okay, how do you look for a job? What are different career pathways? Number 2, then Earlywork Village. So that's our free community on Slack with 5,000 members across Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. And then finally, Earlywork Academy, our most recent pillar, which I'll be diving into much deeper today. So just quickly on content for those who aren't as familiar, this is really what started Earlywork. This was our core pillar. And to date, I think kind of across like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, we've kind of had 4 million views, probably done, like 70 plus blogs. It's been a hell of a journey. But been really lucky to be able to put out resources with a lot of awesome folks in the local and international ecosystem. So, founders, hiring managers, early career talent, and so forth. And then kind of on the community side, as mentioned, with the Earlywork Slack, it's a free Slack. Anyone can join. If you folks aren't in there, you can join today. It's got, over 5,000 members now. And that's really kind of probably the largest tech and startup community for young talent in the APAC region. And it's a place where young people find jobs, learn about the industry, and also just meet one another socially. As for the Earlywork team, for those who don't know us, maybe a cheeky fun fact about each of us. I can allegedly beatbox. Maz has perfect pitch. Jono, who can't be with us today, knows sports jersey numbers like an absolute freak. He can just name any of them. And then Ryan, I don't know if this is a talent, but he always finds the worst places to eat. So you'll be, in coming to Earlywork Academy, get to be with a bunch of quirky turkeys like us, which is good fun. And I think importantly in our journey, kind of leading up to Earlywork Academy, this isn't our first rodeo in helping people find jobs in the tech space. I think kind of over the course of our community so far, we've run, a jobs board, a talent search engine, mentoring services, career coaching services, and kind of over the course that have helped over 100 young people find their first role in tech. And I think, Earlywork Academy is something that's really come out of those reps of just seeing people land jobs again and again and again, and just finding the common patterns, understanding what works and what doesn't. So now for Earlywork Academy. Really, we're building, probably, the first tech sales bootcamp in the Asia Pacific region with a job guarantee. And it's something that's been, again, the culmination of a lot of time spent with candidates and a lot of research with companies, understanding their pains as well. And I think, the vision we see for this is sometimes, kind of breaking into tech industry, it's such a messy process. A lot of random job applications, meeting a lot of random different people for coffee. We wanted to try and build the most efficient pathway to help people break into the tech industry. And where we really saw an opportunity was very much around tech sales, where it's one of the 3 biggest roles by headcount in tech companies in Australia and globally as well. But oftentimes, with sales, it's a role where there's a willingness to take candidates who just have really strong core interpersonal skills, even if it's not specific tech experience or specific degrees. So if you kind of just think about kind of the core pillars for sales, like I think, and I say this quite personally, having worked in sales previously, but I really, really do believe it is the hidden gem of tech careers. From like an earning potential perspective, like, in Australia, the average tech sales role, the salary is between 140 to 160K, and salaries are rising year on year 12%, even with these current economic conditions. In terms of career progression, I think a common misconception is like, okay, you start in sales, you just do the selling part forever. You can be obviously, doing like enterprise deals with like really big companies. You can also be like managing sales teams or mentoring sales teams. But oftentimes, a lot of folks who start in sales will go into sales operations, sales strategy, go-to-market strategy, the marketing side as well. I think it kind of, you get that core customer understanding, you can leverage that across a lot of different areas in the business. And yeah, obviously just mentioned, like, in terms of like a future-proof skill, like thinking about the tech industry, it's one of the 3 biggest roles in tech by headcount. And it's one of the, for many companies, like Atlassian, Microsoft, Google, etc., it's a very, very core pillar of what they do. And it's something that's really, really hard to replace. Like when you're dealing with complex enterprise deals, the human relationships and the human connection are super hard to beat. And kind of finally, I think and this is a really, I'd say, understated aspect of sales, but it's, having worked it myself and having seen a lot of folks in sales, it's actually a really powerful opportunity where if you do have good people skills, your customer empathy, listening skills, communication skills, sales is probably one of the jobs in tech that is the best translation of those skills directly. Like, in all tech jobs, you'll use those to some degree, but I think sales is one where if that's a strength of yours and if that's kind of your flavor and your profile, it aligns really, really nicely, and you can actually turn those people skills into a tech career. And yeah, kind of, again, talking to my story personally here, not a lot of folks know this, but yeah, like when I was in university, I was working in like outbound sales at Uber. So I was bringing on restaurants in, Auckland, Wellington in New Zealand, essentially calling them completely cold and convincing them to come on board the platform. And I'd say, like, in my journey, that gave me a really, really powerful muscle around resilience and dealing with rejection, communication skills, working with a customer and like listening to a customer and tailoring kind of like the pitch and what I'm saying and how I'm framing the conversation to them. And I think from like a leverage perspective, like I use that job very much so, and kind of sold my skills from that job in order to get a project management role at Amazon, later a product management role at Atlassian. And today as a founder, in terms of bringing on investors, bringing on customers, again, that fundamental sales skills helped me massively. It's probably the most important role I did in university. So as a career foundation, I couldn't recommend it more highly. Now, I think when we originally launched this, I think it was a really, really critical decision for us to not just give people something that helps them land a job, but as best we can guarantee it. And I think that's something like we were really, really wanted to push because I think it's quite different from how the traditional education system works. How we do that in terms of kind of the guaranteed tech sales role, I think there's kind of 3 core ingredients to when you think about Earlywork Academy, the value that we're providing. I think number one, it's like we teach the foundational skills of tech sales. So going from kind of prospecting with customers to kind of those first initial outreaches to then deeper discovery. And we actually design that curriculum alongside tech companies. So right now I'm in curriculum design mode, working with companies to ensure that what we're teaching best aligns with the skills they're looking for and the skills they actually use day to day at work. Alongside that, it doesn't just stop at the core skill. We really, really want to ensure that anyone who's coming through this program is very confidently set up to land jobs, not just their first job, but for life. And so what we want to do, and I'm a big believer in this, is to teach the muscle of job search. So thinking about how you leverage LinkedIn DMs, how you leverage content, how to do outreach to, employers, get referrals, kind of all those tips and tricks that we've learned in our respective career journeys, trying to package those up and as best we can train you in those and ensure that you've got the fundamentals down pat there. And I think that kind of the final piece is, unlike university, I think in working very directly with companies on a curriculum, we're also ensuring that, candidates who finish that program are getting direct introductions to employers. So even helping you with that last leg. So as a part of the program, at the conclusion of the 3 weeks, you'll get targeted introductions to the partner companies that we work with, alongside kind of coaching and mentoring around broader job search. And yeah, I suppose like, coming back to like that guarantee piece, because I think it's a really critical one. If we don't land you a job in tech within 6 months of you graduating, we have a money back guarantee. So kind of prior to starting the course, you only pay the deposit, and the rest you only pay if you actually land that job in tech. And the reason why we've built conviction around that, quite aside from I think the points mentioned around sales and the massive market opportunity there, we build the content alongside companies. So actually designing to teach exactly what they need. We do the curated instructions to hiring managers. And then ongoing, we have personalized like one-to-one career support. So for every student that comes into this program, you'll be coached by a member of the early work team, going from kind of the initial stages of that job search journey through to closing the offer. And while I'm at it, just taking a pause there, if you do have any questions, we'll be chucking the Slido in the Zoom chat. And so you can start to chuck those in there, and happy to talk to those more specifically after. So in terms of what you'll be learning, I think this kind of like, we've split this into 3 core week modules. And so kind of the first week really, and again, sessions are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. AEDT. First week is really about building the fundamentals in terms of actually finding, okay, what customers are you going to talk to, and how can you start to reach out to them without even getting on the phone. So what that looks like, in our first session, we kind of walk through an introduction to tech sales. We talk through, okay, what are the career pathways? What are the different sorts of roles, BDR, SDR, customer success, dive a bit deeper on those. And then evaluating, okay, what does the typical sales cycle look like? What does the funnel look like? And then, what role do you play in those if you're stepping into a junior sales role? From there, we then go to qualification research. So this is kind of looking at the prospecting stage, where it's actually identifying, okay, who is your ideal customer? Like an ideal customer persona, like as a business. Then specifically, like what is the persona that you're looking for within that company? Like who's going to be kind of your influencer in the deal, who's going to be your champion in the deal, and then thinking about, okay, how do you actually get relevant information on them? So thinking about, in order to personalize your outreach later on, getting super relevant information on, okay, like, do they have the right sort of role? What are the recent changes that have happened in the business? Personal information about them, stuff they recently shared, and looking at tactics where you can actually find and source leads, both inbound and outbound. Kind of, third session, again, covers written outreach. And so that's looking at different approaches around both LinkedIn and email as 2 core channels, thinking about things like subject line optimization, personalized introductions, CTAs, tailoring pitches, basic objection handling, and then doing kind of follow-up emails. And really importantly with this, we're dipping into tools like Salesforce, like HubSpot. So you'll get the chance to actually, get dirty with the tools, and learn how in industry they use those to make that process a lot more efficient, a lot more streamlined. So that kind of caps off week 1. And then week 2, we actually go deeper into, okay, now live call practice. And so kind of first session there is around cold calls. So looking at the first call that you'll make to a customer and essentially identifying, like optimal times to call, how you introduce yourself on the phone, how to get through gatekeepers. So potentially if it's not the right stakeholder you're talking to, basic objection handling, and kind of those initial questions you ask in order to get them to a more meaningful strategic conversation. Again, kind of second session around discovery calls looks at that deeper customer conversation where, okay, you've got a meeting booked in with a customer and you're going really deep on, okay, what's their situation currently like? What are their pain points? And what's the impact of those pain points on the business? And then from there, reframing and then tailoring your product pitch to really suit what they're looking for. And that's where you start to convert it to a really meaningful buying opportunity. Final component of that week is then the live sales apprenticeship. So this is a pretty special one, and something that's probably a little bit different to most sales courses you'll see. But we actually thought, okay, we're doing a mix of theory and practice throughout this course. And we really, really want to ensure that we're giving you a lot of practical time as well. So we'll be partnering up with a local Australian charity that we'll be announcing soon. And essentially for kind of a half a day to a day, you'll be volunteering with them on prospecting for leads and then doing outreach live on the phone. So like you've learned all this theory, okay, great, let's put it to practice. And so this is a chance where it's like, a practical experience where you can start to test those skills, refine them and flesh them out. Then the final week of the course is entirely dedicated to the job search fundamentals. And so Monday we cover kind of personal branding, like helping you sell your personal story, LinkedIn profile, resume, and the best practices and tips we've learned there. Second session's on job search strategy. So again, thinking about, which companies do you apply to? How do you apply to them? How do you outreach? How do you prioritize them? Can you do stuff that's different to cover letters, like alternatives to stand out? And final one, live interview practice. So with an employer partner, we'll actually be going through real questions that you'll hear in sales interviews and actually getting you to practice those questions and learn what good versus great looks like when it comes to just smashing that interview for an entry-level sales role. Cool. A big question we've been getting from a couple of people is around like who we're looking for. And I think, broadly, like kind of talked like some eligibility and some just desired criteria as well. So I think like, when we think about kind of really three core principles that are super important to us, it's like, I think we're looking for students who have a curiosity and a hunger to learn and very much an attitude and enthusiasm that's where they're keen to understand tech sales and go deep on that. I think number two, strong written and verbal communication is an absolute must. And with that, I think the kind of the customer empathy and listening skills. And I think the final one is just resilience and grit. Like sales can be an amazing profession, but it's also a really, really hard role. There's definitely ups and downs. And so it's people who are able to, go through that difficult period and adjust to that challenge, adapt their approach, and then improve it to get better results. Then just kind of from an eligibility perspective, full working rights in Australia for this first cohort are important. But again, in being mindful around a job guarantee, we really, really want to ensure that we're best positioned to do that. And that's why we kind of have that working rights requirement there, just given employer needs in the market. Then the other one is just actively looking to land your first full-time tech role. So this is not a course if you're just kind of like keen to learn a bit more about sales. This is very much like, I want to find a job in tech sales in the next 3 months. And importantly, like we believe we can add the most value when this is probably like kind of your first role in tech and specifically tech sales. If you've had, one, say like an internship experience or one job in tech, that's probably okay too. But we just want to be mindful around ensuring that the content we're delivering is really, really relevant and really rewarding for a specific persona. And kind of taking a step back here, we're not looking for any specific university degrees, technical skills, business experience. That's not necessarily what's important, as long as you can demonstrate kind of those three core things around, curiosity, communication skills, and resilience and grit. Cool. Now, final section, part 3, application and interview tips, the juicy stuff. It's been super exciting so far. We're at nearly 100 applicants for the academy. I'd love to take on all of you, but unfortunately, we really want to ensure we're starting small and doing the right thing and building the right practices. But hopefully for you folks in this session today, I can give you a few tips that might help you to stand out and ensure that you've got the best chance of getting a spot in the academy. So just kind of going back to kind of, the initial written application. So before the interview, we have a kind of a question around like, what's the one personal professional achievement that you're most proud of? And I think generally what we look for there is like a crisp explanation of your story, identifying very clearly what the actual achievement was, and metrics are good to support that. So specific numbers, and also then how you got there. And then finally, like kind of like, really showing that reflective part after you've explained it very clearly, giving a quick explanation around why that achievement was special to you and potentially a key learning from that or something you've taken with you going forward. So I think what we're looking for here and why we're asking it, to be honest, is just seeing a really strong sense of values, a strong self-awareness in candidates, and that's kind of that empathy element, resilience and the ability to persist through difficult challenges, again, super important sales, and obviously clear written communication. Around question 2 of the application, which is why do you want to work in tech sales? Our recommended structure is give 2 to 3 key reasons for wanting to work in tech sales. And importantly, for each of those reasons, rather than just saying, oh, because the salary is high, oh, because there's good career growth, very specifically explain why that ties to your specific skills or goals. So the personalization of this answer is really, really important. So authenticity and personalization, like why tech sales for you specifically? Why Earlywork Academy for you specifically? What makes your story a genuine fit? And the other one obviously there is like, with 2 to 3 key reasons, just being structured about your communication. Like we shouldn't have to like dive deep in these, like, wait, what are the reasons? Like ideally it's like, there should be them just very clearly outlined. It'd be like bullet points, it could be 1, 2, 3. So just being very clear and distinct around those. And then finally, if you're lucky enough to get through the kind of initial application process for our interview, which will be run by Marina, who's on the call with us as well. 3 key tips I'll give you that I think we really look for in terms of the best candidates. Number 1 is pitching us on how your unique background could translate to tech sales. And I think this is such a beautiful thing because like we've met people in tech sales who come from a range of backgrounds. Like we've met lawyers, we've met people in the army, we've met people who are in retail, we've met people who are in dentistry, there's a lot of super diverse backgrounds, and just because you don't have the traditional background doesn't mean you're not a great fit. But I think it's about showing, okay, how do the skills you've learned in your life and your journey so far potentially translate well to a pathway like this? Number two is signposting. So being structured and answering questions concisely and directly. And when I say signposting, for those who don't know, this is a technique referring to numbering reasons or factors when you're giving a response. So exactly like I'm doing now, like 3 key interview tips: number 1, number 2, number 3. I think the reason why I generally recommend that format is it helps the interviewer to be really clear about the most important things in your answer, and also shows that you're confident communicating in a structured manner, which is super important when it comes to tech sales. And I think the final one, this is always an awesome one, but just like show curiosity and enthusiasm. As in, I think, when it comes to an ideal candidate, it's not someone who's like, oh yeah, maybe this is for me. I think what we're looking for is people who are like, I know what I want. This is super exciting. I'm like ready to get started, and coming with a bunch of questions for us. So I definitely recommend preparing, between 1 and 3 kind of like key questions that where you're curious about, certain things in tech sales, certain things about the program. I think that kind of just reflects well in terms of that genuine passion and that genuine enthusiasm. We do have a bunch of interview tips on earlywork.co/content, of course. So if you aren't too sure about the interview processes and it's not something you've built a ton of experience with, we'd definitely recommend checking those out to put yourself in the best position. Just as a final reminder on key dates. So applications close on January 16th, but importantly, those are on a rolling basis. So what that means is we may fill up the spots for the academy before that date. So if it's something where you're kind of like on the fence or you haven't applied yet, I would strongly encourage you to apply earlier just to give yourself the best chance of getting a spot. We'll be sending all final offers by January 23rd. And the program dates will run from Jan 30 to Feb 15, that 3-week program. Cool. All righty, folks. Thanks so much for listening along. We'll now move to the Q&A section of the session. I do believe there's a Slido in the chat. Stop sharing my screen. So we'll crack open that and get started.
Yes, we already have 5 questions in there. From like a time perspective, super wary of that. So like if you have any questions, not sure if we'll get to like a more open setting. So be sure to like chuck them in the Slido if you want them answered for sure. First one for you, Dan, is what kind of companies are you guys working with for the program?
Yeah, great question. So in the process of confirming our company partners now, but already we've got a couple signed on, and broadly, I would say the category of company tends to be kind of like your growth stage startup to scale up. Oftentimes like some of the bigger tech companies as well, but in particular, the category that we usually look at for tech sales and the ones who are largely kind of coming on board with us for the first cohort, most are B2B software companies. So these are companies that are like selling software usually at the mid-market and enterprise levels. And the reason why that's kind of a primary partner for us is because, sales is a very, very core part of that sort of business model. So yeah, we'll be launching kind of like the full list of kind of company partners later in January, but broadly in terms of like, the style of company, it's generally kind of like, like medium size to kind of on the larger size. And then also, in that B2B type business model.
Cool. Just had one that was upvoted here. What's the average starting salary for one of your graduates / like an entry level tech sales person?
Yeah, really good question. So for context, this is the first or the inaugural cohort for Earlywork Academy, but I can talk to standard salary ranges around tech sales in Australia for an entry level role. So usually thinking about like a BDR or an SDR, so that's business development representative, sales development representative type role. You often see kind of entry level salaries between kind of like the anywhere from like the 60 to the 90K mark. It does vary quite considerably, but it's one that rises very quickly. And I think the really important distinction here is, unlike most roles, sales is very heavily commission based. So oftentimes it's like your base might be, say something like 80K, but then on top of that, you'll have commission. And so if you're performing well, if you're performing above quota, it's not uncommon for an early career role to be making 6 figures when you can take into consideration the kind of like bonus that you get.
Amazing. Next one up is, what is the cost of the program?
Yeah, great question. So there's an initial deposit of like $490 plus GST. The total cost of the program is $1,990 plus GST, so $1,990. Importantly, though, it's like the only thing that you pay prior to starting the course is just that deposit, and the rest you don't pay until after you've completed the program and received a job in tech. And obviously that comes with kind of a refund guarantee if you don't land a job in that 6-month period thereafter. On that kind of final payment, we do split that up for candidates as well, give them the option just in terms of like paying that in a few installments, just from a cash flow perspective.
Cool. Another one up is, how long do you have access to the course content after completion?
Really, really good question. So like kind of, yeah, at this current stage, like we're currently for like, I think the first cohort, just giving like guaranteed access to that content lifetime wise, because I think it's really important with sales content that it's like, it's not just, okay, you learn it once, but you want to be able to kind of come back to it when you're early in your career. So yeah, I think kind of like for the initial cohort, I think we give access to that content even when you're starting a sales career to ensure we're putting you in a position.
Cool. Next one up was, how many people will there be in the class?
Yeah, really good question. So I think it's super, super important to us in starting this program to keep it a little bit smaller, a little bit intimate starting off, so that it's really high touch and we're all giving you a very, very great experience. Like I think something we're super wary of is we don't just want to like take, we get lots of applicants. We don't want to, if we take everyone, we can't necessarily guarantee like an amazing experience for everyone. So I think intentionally we're keeping it a bit smaller. So for the first cohort, it'll likely be around the 15 mark. And those could be candidates in multiple locations, to be clear. But yeah, I think at that mark, you get a more intimate environment where you can get a lot of one-on-one time with every student, where there's kind of a smaller and safer environment for collaboration, for presenting in front of others. So from a learning experience perspective, that's kind of the number we've landed on to start. But for future cohorts, they will likely be expanding.
Cool. Next one up here, plenty are flowing in. Next one I feel they got upvoted, kind of touches on an eligibility point here. Like, are there any relocation opportunities? I'm from Asia, particularly Vietnam.
So in terms of relocation opportunities, something I would clarify is that, yeah, for this program, we do require that candidates have full working rights in Australia. So typically that would often come with like citizenship, permanent residency. I think there are a few other visas, like I think for folks from New Zealand where it is possible. But in terms of like relocation options, again, in working with companies and like designing a program that has a job guarantee, it's not something that like we can guarantee. And so that's why for this program, we're not typically taking on kind of like, folks from, outside the region who don't have those working rights.
Cool. Next question was, are there any other dates for future cohorts?
Yeah, great question. So as in our first cohort will be running from, end of Jan to kind of mid-February. The next cohort from a timing perspective will likely be looking at starting around the April period. We will be publishing kind of confirmed dates for that probably early next year. But just from like, yeah, if you're kind of like thinking about, oh, I'm not able to do that, cohort, I'm overseas, but I'd love to do a future cohort, just from a time perspective, the next one will probably be in another 2 months' time after the original course.
Awesome. Edwin asked, who should we reach out to if we were keen to support this program? For example, coach, run a session, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me or Marina or Ryan, any of us in Slack or LinkedIn. We'd love, we're working with like several folks from industry, both on curriculum design, on mentoring for students, and on guest instructors for some of the sessions. So absolutely like super important for us to be working close with industry. I'd say like, something actually to call out very explicitly is even when you finish the Earlywork Academy program, we don't stop the support there per se. So as in like, yes, we'll help coach you to get a job, but after that, every single student we're pairing with an industry mentor. So someone who's had like a bunch of experience in tech sales. And that way for kind of the first 6 months of your new job at a tech company, you have someone who's outside your company who has the sales expertise, who you can go to for some of those trickier questions when, it might be tricky to ask like kind of your direct boss or ask your teammates. So that's like another way where we will be getting industry folks involved.
Awesome. All right. Next one is, I'm in my penultimate year studying full-time. Would I still be suitable for the academy program? Is it a prerequisite to graduate or work full-time?
Great question. Yeah, so for this program, like very specifically, we are looking for folks who are actively looking to work in a full-time role in tech sales the next 3 months. So I think there are some exceptions where it's like there are uni students who may be willing to take on a full-time job. But to be clear, like, yeah, this isn't for, part-time work or internships. Again, like in designing a program that has a job guarantee and works very closely with employers, like we're very specifically looking at that sort of persona where it's like they're really keen to get a full-time job. So if you're a kind of pre-penultimate and you're like, oh, I'd love to like build some experience, but not looking for a job just yet, probably not the right fit at this stage, but we do still have a lot of free content that we put out through Earlywork that might help you in terms of the internship journey.
Awesome. Next one here kind of touches a little bit more around like the job search side. Will there be further networking opportunities linked to the program and possibility for scholarships?
Great questions. So further networking opportunities with the program. So as a part of the program, there will be several guest instructors from employers coming in. So you'll get the chance to meet people who are working in tech companies and in sales leadership roles and ask them questions. We'll also, I think, be having one specific session with one of our employer partners where we actually go deeper on like kind of the interview process and really deeply understand it for that partner company. So those are kind of probably the primary networking opportunities. But then obviously, yeah, it's like, access to an external mentor that we give you after is kind of another networking in, obviously getting the chance to meet the other students. Those are probably the main ones. On the scholarship side, for the first cohort, just starting off small, we won't be running scholarships, but something that is really important to call out is the first cohort is priced considerably cheaper than what we'll be moving towards. So I think starting off, in kind of like building goodwill and in, showing gratitude to those who kind of really like, believe in what we're doing early on, we're, charging kind of a total price of 1,990. That'll likely rise for the second cohort to kind of a $5,000 figure, keeping in mind that most of that is only after you've landed a job, and incrementally, obviously, from a salary perspective in sales, like that's tens of thousands of dollars.
Tom says, hi, Dan, when you're working in tech sales, is a lot of it remote?
Ooh, Tom, good question. Does depend on the company. I think what's the common model today is it tends to be hybrid. Most tech sales roles aren't fully remote. I do think there tends to be like a stronger office culture around sales. But yeah, as in like, if like, let's say you're exclusively looking for remote opportunities, I do think, yeah, even with our employer partners, there are some way there's kind of the willingness and the openness there. I think especially something you'll notice as a pattern is a lot of the US tech companies will have a sales and marketing team in Australia, but that'll be remote. So oftentimes if the headquarters overseas, they might have a remote team here. But for the ones with a bigger base here, usually there is that kind of hybrid culture. So you kind of get the office culture and then the flexibility as well.
Amazing. Next question. In terms of the guaranteed tech sales role, is there some room to negotiate the starting time? For example, is it okay to start this role 10 to 12 months later?
Yeah, great question. So for our first cohort, like as in, we're very specifically looking at those who want to start within 3 months. And the reason why that is because they have the highest need. Like, I think it wouldn't be the right thing of us to give a spot to someone who's only looking for a job in 12 months time if there's another person who's really keen, who's looking for a job right now. So that's why, we're pretty intentionally, we are focused on folks who do have kind of like that strong desire to start full-time within 3 months of graduating the program.
Awesome. Next question. Do you suggest this program for an experienced candidate who wants to start his career path in Australia?
Ooh, my follow-up question would be experience in what? So we are very, very open to career switches from other pathways, other roles. It's not about a years of experience sort of thing. However, to be clear, in terms of the way we're designing the program, it is targeted at kind of the entry-level sales roles. So this is foundational sales skills, foundational sales understanding, and getting that first job in sales. If you're someone who's already worked in, say, like a sales leadership role or a sales manager role in tech, probably wouldn't be the right fit. However, we have had like a fair bit of interest from folks who've worked in sales, but outside of tech. and the tech sales, the life cycle, the methodology is a bit different. So yeah, I think my kind of question for you, or my follow-up for you, would be like, yeah, it depends on what experience you've had previously and whether that's in tech sales or not.
Cool. This is a personal question for you, Dan. How did you use your tech sales background to transition to other roles like project/product management?
Yeah, great question. So like when I was interviewing for Amazon and then later Atlassian, like I would use my tech sales experience in interview questions and situational questions. And I think the thing I would often talk to, as in like in both of those roles, project management and product management, communication is a really, really, really critical skill. Like you ask anyone who's in those roles, and it's like good communication is what separates the good from the great. And so I'd often say to employers, well, look, I've like, spent the past 6 months like talking to hundreds of customers, having kind of conversations, leveraging persuasion skills, leveraging kind of like, like customer listening, empathy, understanding. It's like, so I think you can talk to the applicability of that in terms of user interviews, in terms of cross-functional collaboration internally in those roles, in terms of like really strong presentations, which you will often do internally and externally. And then I think, yeah, kind of that sales skill, just like the customer understanding is really powerful, especially if you're working on a project that is more customer facing. So saying like, hey, like I've had exposure to like, understanding like, a bunch of different customers, different business sizes, different locations, and just like tailoring the information that I give or tailoring the support according to what that customer needs. And so I think it's about, yeah, like, the customer communication skills are fundamentals in a lot of those roles as well. And having had that sales experience, I think put me in a much stronger position to, yeah, build a really well-rounded profile for those roles.
Awesome. Wary of time, there's 3 questions left, so we'll probably wrap it up with these 3. If you have any questions further than that, feel free to like message either like Dan, Marina, or me afterwards as well, if you like wanted in like a more personalized setting for an answer. But first one, it was just around like, what's the handover process from finishing the course to the employer onboarding?
Yeah, great question. So 3 key things I'll call out here. Number 1 is we will give you like target instructions via email, usually to some of our partner employers, depending upon like where we see which candidates might be a fit for which companies. Number 2 is then we'll also like, you'll have probably weekly mentoring sessions with one of the Earlywork team members around your job search journey. And then number 3 will obviously be kind of like the application kind of like process and just ensuring that you're like consistently putting in touch points with a lot of different employers each week. So to be clear, it's like at the end of the program, it's not like you will be matched to one specific company, as in we want to give you the tools. We'll introduce you to several companies, and then we'll also give you the tools that you can go out and do that yourself beyond that. So it's kind of this 2-prong approach to maximize your chances of getting a role quickly.
Cool. Next question is in a similar vein to Tom's question, was just around like, is the apprenticeship / is the like tech sales role remote or on-site?
Yeah, great question. So in being mindful around taking candidates from a number of different locations, so Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, we want to ensure that can be accessible to everyone. So for this cohort, the apprenticeship model will be remote, obviously to give candidates flexibility in that regard.
Awesome. And the final question that we have, this is a non-academy related question. But the question is, I have a genuine sales question. What is another good sales role if tech isn't for you?
Wow. My pushback would be like, why do you think tech isn't for you? I would actually contend that within tech, there's a lot of diversity in terms of type of industries. Like you could be working on health, finance, education. I would contend, software is eating the world. And so most industries you're working will have tech companies. That being said, if generally for whatever reason you're like, oh, software, gross, I never want to work on that. In theory, like, you will see other sales roles in, education space, in the finance space, in the real estate space, in the charity, not-for-profit space. You do see a bunch of sales roles. Feel free to message me if you wanted more specific advice there. But I would contend that tech is a pretty diverse landscape. And so I'd be careful about striking it off your list.
Cool. And look at that, finishing just on time and just as the let's go out.
Chef's kiss. We love it. Efficiently run this.
Amazing. So yeah, that was all the questions. As I was saying before, feel free to shoot, like either Dan, me, or Marina. on LinkedIn. I think is there a question there, Donnie? Yeah, the best way, Donnie, if you want to like contact like any of us, I think like we're all pretty active on LinkedIn. Just send us like a little personalized invite, being like, yeah, we went to the program intro event and like would love to tee up a time to chat, or like had a few questions, and we're more than happy to like answer them there. So no problems. But awesome. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Yeah, also like final plug, be sure to join the Earlywork Village as well. Great place to meet other people like want to break into tech or already working in tech. Something we're like super passionate about. So hopefully we'll see some of these names around, but apart from that, thank you everyone for coming, and have a great rest of the night.
Definitely. Bonus points if you message me there instead of LinkedIn. Cheeky bonus points.